Hello, my name is Phil Easter, historian and writer from Baltimore, Maryland, also known as the Amazing Memory Man. We are recording tonight on Sunday, April 9th, 2023, Easter Sunday. So happy Easter to all from Phil Easter. How about that? Um, This is story number 25 on my YouTube channel, which is Phil Easter, the Amazing Memory Man. Tonight we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, very dear to my heart, the Boston Marathon. In the 1970s, I ran the Boston Marathon 5 times in 5 consecutive years between 1972 and 1976. First, a little history going way back. The Boston Marathon began in 1897. The year before, in 1896, the first modern Olympics were held in Athens, Greece, and the first marathon race ever was at those Olympics. Now, some people mistakenly believe that the marathon was held in the ancient Olympics as a race, but actually that is not true. The marathon race in 1896 in Athens at the first modern games commemorated an event that took place in Greece in the year 490 BC, when the Greek army defeated the Persians at the Battle of Marathon, and the general asked one of the soldiers to then run about 24 miles from Marathon to Athens to bring news of the Greek victory. And he did run the distance, and upon arrival he shouted, "Rejoice, we conquer," and then he fell dead, exhausted from that effort and also having fought the battle earlier in the day. So that was what happened in ancient Greece. So it was not a competitive race, it was just the first modern Olympics in 1896. The marathon race in part commemorates that event that took place in ancient Greece. Well, the next year in Boston, they decided to have a marathon, and it's become an annual event, the oldest continuous city marathon in the world, held just about every year since 1897. There were only about 17 competitors that year, and John McDermott from New York won the race in 2 hours and 55 minutes. In the early 20th century, there was a great runner named Clarence DeMar. He won the marathon in Boston in 1911. He loved running, but shortly after that, he went to see a doctor for a checkup, and the doctor thought he had some type of heart murmur or whatever, something was wrong with his heart, and he suggested to Clarence that he should stop running. Well, Clarence did not like that news, but he listened to the doctor. For the next few years, he did not run. And then he heard that the doctor who examined him died of a heart attack. At which point Clarence DeMar said, "What the heck, I'm going to start running again." On that day, I think he was listening to his heart rather than my own, he jokingly said to somebody. But so he decided to continue running, and he would go on to win the Boston Marathon 6 more times, his last victory in 1930. So he won a total of 7 times. And who knows, he probably would have won a few more times if he hadn't followed that doctor's quote advice. Of course, back then, over 100 years ago, the medical, technology was not what it is now, obviously. So I guess that doctor just somehow mistook something and thought it would be better for him not to run. But he has the record of winning the most Boston Marathons. Clarence DeMar won 7 times. Well, later on in the 1930s, a great runner named John Kelly was running, and John Kelly is an amazing runner. He started the Boston Marathon a total of 61 times and finished 58 times. The last time he ran was in 1992 at age 84. Imagine that, running. Think of all the people who don't even live to be 61 years old. And he ran the Boston Marathon 61 times, finishing 58 times, and he did win twice. He won in 1935, and 10 years later he won again in 1945. At ages 27 and 37, he won the marathon twice, and around that time period he also came in second as many as 7 times. But he did just about everything. He won several times and also finished that great race more than anyone else. 58 times he finished. John Kelly lived much of his life on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and he lived to be 97 years old. In 1970, a great runner from England by the name of Ron Hill won the Boston Marathon. And later that year, he also won the Commonwealth Games gold medal in Edinburgh, Scotland. Ron Hill's time in 1970 was about 2 hours and 10 minutes. It was the best time up until that point for the Boston Marathon. Ron Hill took part in 3 Olympic Games, by the way, representing Great Britain at the 1964, 68, and 72 Olympic Games. I went to the 1972 Olympics, and among the track events I saw was the marathon, and I was very happy that Frank Shorter of the United States became the first American to win the Olympic marathon in 64 years. Ron Hill finished 6th that day. In his 3 Olympics, he never quite won a medal. He did not finish in top 3, but he certainly was a very great runner in many other competitions. As I say, he won Boston in 1970, and in 1974, in a race here in the Baltimore area called the Maryland Marathon, which began in 1973. 74 was just the second year they had the Maryland Marathon, and Ron Hill won. Now I remember I was running that year myself, and it was an odd course. It was like 13.1 miles in one direction, and then you turned around and came back 13.1 miles for the total of 26.2. And you see people at my pace, a lot of runners were well ahead of me, so it's kind of depressing. You're running towards people who are actually several miles ahead of you in some cases. But that was at least interesting, and a very nice man, Ron Hill. I got to meet him twice here in Baltimore a few years later at the 1977 and 78 Maryland Marathons, which he also ran. Ron Hill ran more than anyone else in world history. He ran every single day for 52 years and 19 days. Unbelievable. I think he considered like a 1 mile workout the shortest distance, or somewhere around there, but most of the time he was running many miles. And he ran somewhere around 100 marathons. But again, he won Boston in 1970. Well, 2 years later, 1972, I was 19 years and 6 months old exactly on April 17th, 1972. As my birthday is October 17th, so exactly 6 months short of 20, I went up to Boston and ran and finished the marathon that day. I was so happy. I'd run track and cross country in high school just a few years before, but to finish the most famous marathon in the country was a great feeling. And it so happens on that same day, in April 17th, 1972, women were allowed to run officially for the first time. Now, in previous years, there were some women who ran, but they were not considered official. The people who ran the Boston Marathon, they just did not consider women running officially until 1972. And the woman who won that year, her name is Nina Cusack. Nina Cusack, the first official female champion of the Boston Marathon in 1972. I continued running there in 73, 4, 5, and 6. I finished 3 of the 5 times I ran, including 1976 when it was very hot that day. The 12 noon temperature in Hopkinton, the small town in Massachusetts, that's 26.2 miles from the finish at the Prudential Center in Boston. The temperature was 100 degrees for Boston in April. It was unprecedented. It was by far the hottest Boston Marathon ever. And and it rarely does it get 100 in Boston, even in the summertime, just once in a while. And this was in April. So I knew I had to go slower in order to finish, but I was very proud to at least finish that day. It was my slowest time of the 8 marathons I ever finished in my life, but I was very proud just to finish on that day. And so many people in Boston, the spectators were so generous in helping people with, they always gave out water and slices of oranges, which is a delicious, to have a little bit of that every now and then when you're running. But that day there were more people than ever helping out, and that was great. But the year before, going back to 1975, that was the year that Bill Rodgers won his first of 4 Boston marathons. It was April 21st, 1975. That was a pretty nice day, in the 50s, I think, temperature-wise. Nice, reasonable, cool, and a lot of runners like a little cooler than hotter for long-distance running. And my mom, she came up that year, and to watch the marathon, and she saw him finish, and then had to wait around a few more hours before I finished. But I met Bill Rodgers twice the next year in 1976, and one of those times I met him that year, he came back from Eugene, Oregon, where the Olympic trial race was held to make the United States Olympic team that would go to Montreal in July of '76, and he finished second. The top 3 runners made the team, and I got to talk to him at a bar called the Elliott Lounge in downtown Boston, where a number of runners, it was popular with runners, and I knew the bartender, and he was a runner, and he told me that Bill Rodgers would be there one evening with a few friends to celebrate his making the U.S. Olympic team. It was great to talk to him and just share stories about our running experiences. Well, in 1980, there was the 4th time that Bill Rodgers won. There was also a controversial incident regarding a woman named Rosie Ruiz. I think she came from New York City, and she appeared to be the winner and was interviewed by newspaper reporters and TV stations for a while. But later they realized she had jumped into the marathon. She waited until a certain number of men went by, but well before the first official woman, who was honestly running the whole distance, she jumped in just about a mile away from the finish. And talk about cheating, big time cheating, and was credited for the win for a while until they figured that out. So the name of the lady that really won the Boston Marathon's women's division in 1980 was Jacqueline Gouraud from Montreal, Canada. The Boston Marathon has become even more popular over the years, and many thousands of people run. It's a great event. It goes, as I say, it goes all the way back to 1897. However, 10 years ago, this month, in April of 2013, the exact date was April 15th, 2013, sadly, 2 men detonated bombs at the Boston Marathon, and 3 people were killed, and about 100 people were injured, both spectators and runners. A terrible event, like so much terrorism we've seen around the world in the last 50 or so years. And it happened at the Boston Marathon 10 years ago this month. A very sad event, 3 people killed and about 100 injured. And the very next day, those 2 terrorists also shot and killed a police officer at MIT University in Cambridge. Later that day, the police figured out that they put it all together, and one of the 2 terrorists was shot and killed. The other was captured and has since gone on trial, and I think he has a life prison sentence. Just a terrible event, like so many other places in the world. The Boston Marathon, a victim of terrorism 10 years ago. And as I will think about that in the coming week, because this year's Boston Marathon will be 8 days from now, a week from tomorrow on Monday, April 17th. And I'm sure some of the TV networks and even social media will point out that it's been 10 years since a terrible incident. But the Boston Marathon, a great tradition of long distance running, and I'm so happy that I was able to meet some of the best runners over the years, and also that I took part 5 times and finished 3 times. This is Phil Easter, the amazing memory man. We'll see you next time, another story on another subject. Thank you and good night.